As a parent, letting go is one of the scariest things you'll ever be asked to do.
It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
I can't believe you just blew a raspberry at me.
Really?
You literally just went at me. Yeah, thanks so much. So every now and again when we're putting this podcast together, we have our moments, don't we?
You're not supposed to tell everyone that.
Maybe you have your moments. I'm going to leave it. It's not really you, is it? What happens is when we start the podcast, I'll usually say something like, I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the author of 6 books about raising happy families. And then I'll say something about Kylie, how she's my co-host. And today's Friday. And so I'll say, how good are Fridays? And Kylie just looks at me like, how am I supposed to respond to that? And I'm like, well, you just start talking. And Kylie's like, no, we need to script this. So how do you feel about Fridays?
I love Fridays.
It's our last podcast for the week.
I absolutely love Fridays.
Is there a particular reason other than that you don't have to sit down and try to work out how we're going to figure this out?
I don't have to make a school lunch tomorrow morning.
Right. Hey, you know what? Since we started making mornings magic, and we did that podcast episode about it just a couple of weeks ago, but we've been practicing those making mornings magic skills for a few years now. We don't really have to make many school lunches. You know, it's only the baby, really. It's only our 6-year-old that needs help with her school lunch.
That's what I'm telling you. I don't have to make her lunch tomorrow.
But we don't even have to do much for her. Like, she gets it going. But yes, you're right. We don't have to. Instead, we get to tidy the house and do all the all the easy things.
I get to take the kids to Nippers. Yeah. It's the best way to start the weekend.
I am looking forward to that. Hey, I want to this is the episode every week where we talk about how we're going to do better tomorrow, because we make so many mistakes as parents and we want to own that sort of stuff. But this week I want to do something a little bit different, because I had something happen that just, I love what I do. I feel like the work that I do is really meaningful and it makes a difference in the world. And I get emails with some frequency from people who say, we're so grateful for the podcast or the books or the Facebook page or the Happy Families membership because our family's happier because of it. But I had an experience that just left me weeping in the last couple of days. I got an email from somebody and I wanted to share it. Do you mind if I share that with you?
I'd love to hear it.
Okay, it's a really nice one. So there's a little bit of background here, but basically I was dealing with somebody who was having a very, very, very hard time in their family. And the long and the short of it is that I invited them to participate in a webinar that they probably technically didn't have to be at. It wasn't something that really involved them, but I just thought if I can get them to just see the world a little bit differently without me talking to them, it might make a difference. Anyway, I got an email from somebody who knows them telling me that it made a difference. And here's what the email said. At the end of our catch up, he said to me, I had a really amazing time at that Justin Coulson webinar the other night. I enjoyed it very much. He talked about how it had made him reflect on his own parenting practices. Now, the background to this is that this dad in particular I'm not really exaggerating when I say he had an anger problem, and he was treating his, 7-year-old son really, really badly. And he said that since the webinar, he'd started employing several of the strategies that I'd talked about in the webinar. And then just this morning, this friend said, he told me that his younger son was being a pain and wouldn't get in the car, and he just wanted to step in and be angry and say, just do as you're told, just get in the car. But instead, he hugged his son, acknowledged the big feelings that his son was having, and then said, since you're having such a hard time, what do you need from me so I can help you? How can I help? And then his son just pretty much gave Dad a hug and hopped in the car and put his seatbelt on. And he said it took less time to do this than it would have taken to wrangle the child into his car seat. Said how much he learnt from it. And I just thought, this is why I do what I do. And because of that webinar, and maybe even because of this podcast, there's a little 7-year-old or 8-year-old boy or whatever the age of this kid is, I can't quite remember now, whose dad's being a little bit kinder and who didn't get yelled at today, didn't get a wallop on the backside. Instead, he got a hug, he got some understanding, and then he got into the car happy so that he could go off to school.
I love Fridays for this reason, and I love that story because this is what Fridays is all about. This recognition that I can be and do better tomorrow. You know, we all get it wrong. We all mess up, and sometimes we mess up bad. But the reality is that if we are intentional, we can be better.
You know where that story actually, it reminds me of how I learnt that strategy. So I've got the PhD. I've done all the reading and all the research, but reading the stuff and actually applying it are totally different. And I remember a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, when we were living in Wollongong on the New South Wales South Coast, and we had an issue in the car one day with the kids. They were really being nasty to each other in the car, and I pulled the car over. I got them out of the car, standing on the side of the road, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with them now? Now they're in public, and I'm not going to whack them. You know, I'm this parenting expert. I'm supposed to get this right. And so instead I gave them, I looked at them all and said, you're really struggling with each other, aren't you? Come and give me a hug. Let's figure this out. How can we make this right? And 30 seconds later, we were back in the car after we'd had a hug and everything was right. And a couple of days later, I was on the radio doing this radio interview, and I shared that experience. And I said, so next time the kids are driving you crazy in the car, pull the car over, give them a hug, and everything will be okay. And the radio announcers were like, that is just so ridiculous. But about a week later, when I was talking to them again, they were like, we got so many phone calls over the next week from all these families that were like, yeah, we pulled over and we gave our kids a hug and it was amazing. It worked. And I think that's the whole thing, right? I'll do better tomorrow. If you've had a lousy day, give your kids a hug, make it better. And it's incredible how quickly the relationships are restored and life is good again.
I really appreciate you sharing that story. It was awesome. Feel-good story for a Friday morning.
All right, next we're going to find out how you're going to do better tomorrow.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
Today we're talking about I'll do better tomorrow.
And it's your turn. Now, I'm kind of skipping out this week. I haven't really had a great story that I could tell, but I really loved the email that I got about that dad who realised that he could do better tomorrow. And that's just so heartwarming for me. And I think that's more inspiring sometimes than hearing that I'm messing up. But you, I don't know exactly what you're going to tell me, but you had a very interesting conversation with one of our daughters who has a boyfriend. That's all I know.
Well, last week we actually talked about this whole concept of when's too young to have a boyfriend.
24.
And we acknowledged that we had only just found out that one of our older daughters has a boyfriend.
I mean, she's almost 17. She's only a few weeks off 17. So it's not like she's a grade one or a preppy.
Yeah. And you acknowledged last week that even though, she's old enough that it was still a little bit confronting for you as a dad.
It still is.
Yeah. And so I guess, my thought processes have been a little bit more challenged than yours. We're probably not necessarily on the same page with this. There's this recognition that she's old enough to have a boyfriend. Like, logically, I recognize that.
Yeah.
But my heart just says, no, not yet. I'm not ready.
Even though it's a good thing, right? Like they're good kids. They're behaving themselves, it's still just so hard to let it happen.
And as I was listening to one of your podcasts from before I came on, and you were talking to Wendy Grolnick.
Oh, from Clark University. This was, if you haven't heard it, such a great conversation about controlling your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you're going.
Yeah,
okay.
It really triggered something in me. And so I had to kind of have this internal conversation as I kind of unpacked why I was feeling the way I was. The reality is she's 17 in 2 months' time. So she's getting there. In a year's time, she's going to be an adult. And I really have a say in her life once she becomes an adult. So, at this point in time, she's really at a stage where she should be able to start to make these kind of decisions for herself. She's been upfront with us. She actually wants our involvement. She's not doing this behind our back. She's so excited about this new space of her life, and she's including us in the process. And as a parent, I should be grateful for that. But also, I recognise that I've taught her really well. I've taught her what our values are as a family and the things that are important to us. And even from the psychology researcher in our home, she's heard it all.
I've given her some lectures, haven't I?
She knows the ins and outs, the whys and the nots and all of that. And so as I kind of started to, think about those things, I recognised and realised that I want to control her. She's still my little girl. I want to know it all, and I don't.
I reckon if you were to put a list together of the hardest things you've got to do as a parent, number one would be watching your children struggle and suffer, especially when the suffering is beyond anyone's control. But I reckon a close number two is actually letting go.
Yeah. And when I thought about how I felt when I was her age, I was just a girl who wanted my parents to be okay, be cool with this idea of me growing up and letting me have and share my experiences with them.
You know, I love that insight. When I was that age, I wasn't even thinking about my parents. I was just, I can't wait for what's coming. And I'm so excited about it. And if my parents came into the picture at all, it was, why can't you be excited too?
And that's what I wanted. I just wanted their excitement. I wanted their approval. I wanted their acceptance. And so when I kind of tapped into that, when I tapped into what I wanted at her age, we ended up having a conversation quite out of the blue. I didn't even know it was going to happen. But we were in the car and she started talking about, life choices and this boyfriend and, what she wanted to do after school and the fact that she might want to travel. And our previous conversations have been me kind of trying to talk her out of all of those things. I don't want her to travel around the world right now, once she finishes high school. I don't want her to have a boyfriend. I don't want her to, do X, Y, and Z. And then I kind of realized with Wendy's help and with a little bit of, kind of introspective thinking that that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted all of those things. And I said to her, I just had to have a really honest, open conversation with her. I said, Ella, as a parent, letting go is one of the scariest things you'll ever be asked to do. Whether it's your almost 17-year-old telling you she has a boyfriend, or your 18-year-old wanting to travel around the world, or watching her pick a career isn't well suited to her skills or strength. Yet the reality is it's actually not my journey, it's hers. And I have to celebrate the fact that she is making decisions for herself and she's going in her direction because she's choosing it.
Well, this parenting game, it's all about growth. Great story. I'll do better tomorrow. So the idea is let's control a little less and let's celebrate their optimism and hope and excitement for the future.
It felt really, really good to connect with her and to have that conversation and, kind of further to that, just realizing that I am looking through the lens of a 40-plus-year-old woman with experience and seeing all the pitfalls and wanting to stop my children from having those experiences because they hurt. It hurts when you fall, right? But the reality is when I look back on my own life, I recognize and know that it's those pitfalls, those hard times that have helped me to grow and mold me into the person I am today. And I wouldn't change any of that.
I'm going to call that winning. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you do enjoy the podcast, we love it when you visit Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. It's the reviews that help people to find the podcast and have happier families. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Thank you, Justin. And our executive producer, as always, is Craig Bruce. If you'd like more information about how we can help make your family happier, please jump online to happyfamilies.com.au.